It says, and I quote, "Election advertising means the transmission to the public by any means during an election period of an advertising message that promotes or opposes a registered party or the election of a candidate, including one that takes a position on an issue with which a registered party or a candidate is associated." You removed a registered party and therefore applied a new interpretation of the law. That's the first change that you've offered today in legal position of your agency. The second one is these 5 factors. I note that in the legal proceedings that are underway, the Executive Director of Political Financing and Corporate Services, Ms. Janice Vezina, she did not enumerate these as the 5 factors making the expenditures national instead of local. She had something different to say, and I'll quote from the Ottawa Citizen on the 5th of July. Quote, "Ms. Vezina allowed that in certain circumstances a candidate could choose to promote his party leader in his ads and still be allowed to claim the ad as a campaign expense. The key point," she said, "was whether the, quote, end result of the ads was the promotion of a candidate." End result were her words, quoted by the Ottawa Citizen. What is the difference between promoting a candidate or promoting a party?
Well, I think, if I may, I think both can serve each other. I think the idea here, and as I mentioned that in my presentation, it's up to the candidate to determine what promotes their candidacy. If it's through their personal promotion, as they're called, if it's through the relying on the brand of the party, on the policy of the party, on the leader, that is the decision of the candidate. It's not the decision of Elections Canada.
Well, that's good to learn. I would like to give you an example of the accusation, because that, just before I move on, I should point out that that is not what Ms. Vezina testified in recent legal proceedings with the Conservative case against Elections Canada. She said it was the end result of the advertisement, which I think is a very curious position, because I don't think that any government agency can ascertain and rule on the end result of an advertisement, especially considering the fact that you concede there's no distinguishing between the benefits to a party and its candidate. Let me give you an example of your accusation. I will read you an email from one of our party's bookkeepers. I'll read it to illustrate the practice that you have, through your 5 factors here, deemed not to be allowed. Quote, "Hi, Phyllis. We are told by communications folks in BC that there were radio ads with the candidate's personal tag on the end. Therefore, a local expense to be reported under the candidate's expense ceiling, regardless of who pays. For rebate purposes, we are asked to bill each campaign. In the case of Vancouver East, $2,612. The good news is that the federal party will transfer $2,600 to the Federal Riding Association, as we agreed to pay for the ads. We hope that you were able to squeeze this under the ceiling." End quote. $2,600 was transferred from the party in and out to pay for advertising organized by the party, constructed by the party, and for which the party did all the dealings with the advertising agency. What is wrong with that?
I think 2 things. I think some of the discussion or comments made by with regard to Mrs. Vezina's affidavit, I think these are better left to the federal court. I think counsels for each party
Fair enough.
will argue these matters before the judge in due course. With regard to the specific case, again, I'm not a position here today to discuss any specific case. I'm not privy to the statement you're reading. I don't have all the supporting documents, and again, if I had to go through this process, I will run with all the concepts that I mentioned earlier. Was it incurred? Was it for value? Was there a transfer? Was it paid? Was it used? Was it used during the campaign? And all those circumstances that I would have to look through and determine if the transaction was consistent with the requirement of the legislation.
The email in question is an email from the NDP National Party bookkeeper, Lucie Ladouceur, and she sent it in an email to campaign of NDP MP Libby Davies. And it meets all of the characteristics that you've laid out with respect to the conservative transactions that your agency has singled out. So we would hope that you would take a second look. That email is in your possession. In fact, it was filed with Elections Canada, and we obtained it from your agency. I'd like to move on to the issue of the leak of the planned visit of the Elections Canada to the Conservative Party headquarters. An email exchange obtained through access to information shows that Elections Canada was totally preoccupied with the widespread public belief that the agency had leaked its planned visit to the Conservative headquarters. Mr. Mayrand, you wrote in an April 18th email to Ms. Vesna, quote, "This may be a pure diversion tactic, competitive frustration from a media outlet vis-a-vis another," end quote. Now, blaming the media aside, the email shows that you and Ms. Vesna referred to the leak. The email showed that you referred to the leak 7 times. Obviously, you took this concern very seriously. So I'd like to know who exactly conducted the internal review which you mentioned earlier.
People responsible for the various programs in the organization.
And what are their names?
Mainly myself.
So you did it, okay.
My Director of Communication and Commissioner's Office.
Okay, so can you share with us all of the notes from that investigation, please?
Yes.
How many people were aware in advance of the planned headquarters visit?
So,
How many people were aware in advance of the planned headquarters visit?
you mean of the search?
Yes.
There were 3 people at Election Canada.
They were the only 3 that knew at Elections Canada.
Outside of the Commissioner's Office, yes.
And who were they?
Myself, the Deputy Chief Electoral Officer, and the Director of Communications.
And that you all investigated yourselves in connection with this alleged leak?
Well, I guess I'm satisfied that I did not. I don't know, unless there's other information that suggests the link to Elections Canada, which I would very much like to look.
Would you propose...
emails that you have cited, or the material that you have cited, there was a real concern at Elections Canada about anything of that nature. Since we attach to our independence, impartiality, and fairness.
Well, you've been very vigorous in investigating our party. You certainly have not and should not let us investigate ourselves. Why would you think it appropriate that you would personally investigate yourself and your communications director would investigate herself with respect to this leak? Why would you consider that to be a reasonable inquiry method?
I'll be first to admit that when allegations are made, put in written form, and put before the proper authorities, I will welcome an investigation in that matter. At this point of time, it's allegations that have been made mostly through the media, which we reviewed and didn't see any cause to carry any further steps or any formal investigation for that matter.
In the series of emails that I mentioned earlier, you indicated that you wish to, quote, kill or, quote, dispel the news stories about the leak. Those words were used 4 times by yourself and Ms. Vesna. In an April 18th email, Ms. Vesna said, quote, "Perhaps we do it through a joint press release with the RCMP and the Commissioner's Office and the DPP, if appropriate." I understand the DPP to refer to the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yes.
Has the Director of Public Prosecutions investigated the leak? And if not, why was the Director of Public Prosecutions mentioned in this email?
Okay, that's a good point. He was not involved in this. It was strictly internal to Elections Canada, the review that was done. I did not ask the RCMP to review the matter, and I did not ask the DPP. Why is the DPP involved? The DPP is the council that presented the motion to obtain the search warrant.
Thank
So
you.
they are, of course, familiar with the file.